This especially applies to those works that trace back to Rembrandt's wife because she mastered his style and technique perfectly. As an example, it is to be said that out of all existing Rembrandt etchings, only 178 of these trace back to his own art, while a further 111 must be attributed to his wife. All the rest trace back to imitations of students and counterfeiters. Concerning the alleged Rembrandt drawings, the number is still much higher. Also, the most diverse painted works, so the paintings that are attributed to Rembrandt, do not truly trace back to him but, instead, to his wife, Saskia, who lived in deep humility in relation to her great skill and left all the fame to her husband. Also, there are several imitations of his students, as well as obvious forgeries, but these are known as such. Billy says, then another question regarding the engraved stones of Ica, which should have been excavated since the early 60s, namely in the desert of Acuque in Peru, or in the vicinity of the provincial capital, Ica. The figures engraved into the stones, so it is claimed, are supposed to have originated at least 100 million years ago, produced by people of a civilization of a very high level. Thus, the engravings show, for example, technological devices that, nowadays, find their use in optics and in surgery, etc. Even transplants are illustrated by the engravings, but also extinct prehistoric animals of various kinds. There are even engravings to be found on the stones that show people or human-like creatures on flying dinosaurs, etc. These matters became known at the beginning of the 70s. The stones were kept in Lima in the Centro Aeronautico, but basically, more than 10,000 strange exhibits like this should be in the so-called stone library of a certain Dr. Javier Cabrera in Ica. Do you know what's going on with these engraved stones? Quetzal says, the whole thing is well known to me. The engraved stones are forgeries that trace back to a man named Basilio Achuez, who engraved forms that he took from newspapers, magazines, and professional journals into the ancient stones. Achuez was a grave robber who earned his living thereby, namely by desecrating old graves and stealing the grave goods, which he sold to tourists and collectors. Then, over time, also several family members helped the forger to engrave the stones, on the basis of the drawings that Basilio Achuez had made from the newspapers and journals. Billy says, there still remains for me an important question, as you know. In the 60s, I got to know Yasser Arafat, whose temporary epithet was Abu Amr. Concerning him, Sam Yasser once told me that he would become a great political talking point and play an important role as a president frontman of the PLO, when everything starts to escalate between the Israelis and the Palestinians. What do you know about this? Have you made any predictions relating to this? And if so, may one get to know what was revealed? Quetzal says, actually, according to our conditions, we shouldn't talk about future things. Nevertheless, until now, we have done this over and over again. Billy says, I think that it wasn't forbidden but only recommended, right? Quetzal says, that is correct. Billy says, then we can still discuss certain aspects of the future. Quetzal says, that, too, is correct, for silence over such things was actually just a recommendation for the event that you could publicly talk about it in advance. But on the other hand, one also spoke of the fact that predicting for the Earth person bears no fruit because, despite the warnings of the evil events of the future, he continues in his old style. Billy says, and since I remain silent for the time being, you can probably tell me what you know and what your future viewings have shown. Quetzal says, that I can. Well, then listen. Yasser Arafat has always made a secret of his real full name, which is why there are at least 3 different versions of a relevant form. First, there is the name Yasser Mohammed Arafat, then the name Rahman Abdel Rauf Arafat al-Qudwa al-Husseini, and then the name Mohammed Abdel Rauf Arafat. On the one hand, he maintained that he had been born on the 27th of August, 1928 in Jerusalem, but on the other hand, he claims to have seen the light of world in Cairo. His political career is remarkable. As a true engineer, he became the founder and leader of the guerrilla organization Al-Fatah in 1958. A few years after your acquaintance with him, he became chairman of the PLO Central Committee in 1969. In the coming time, he will take on secret negotiations with representatives of Israel, through which he will then make it that the Palestinians receive a limited autonomy in Jericho and in the Gaza Strip, which might happen in September of 1993. Through his efforts, he will also receive the Nobel Peace Prize in 1994, after which he will then be elected as President of the Autonomous Territories of Palestine in 1996. In this office, it will be very difficult for him because he will have to deal with the opposition of radical Palestinian and Arab forces, especially with the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad organization. However, he won't actually be the right man for the office of Palestinian president because out of fear of the radical Palestinian and Arab forces, he will be driven to spread their terrorism by suicide bombers in Israel and to spread more and more death and terror. This will get out of control to a great extent because Yasser Arafat and his security forces will stand by idly or only very laxly do something about the fact that Israel will take the toughest measures and destroy many facilities of the Palestinians with rockets and bombs, as well as with tanks, whereby also many human lives will be demanded, both guilty and innocent alike. As touching the Americans, Israel will strike them without mercy, but also the Palestinian terrorists will likewise do this. In contrast to the Palestinians, the Israelis will be able to count on the aid of America and of many misled people of many countries, while the Palestinians will only have a few Arabic states behind themselves. But on the whole, it must be said that the one like the other is addicted to false actions and to murderous, inhuman, inhumane, life criminal, and human criminal actions and deeds, as this will be the case with the autocratic Americans who, more and more, want to take on the role of a powerful, merciless, and irresponsible world police force and, at the same time, treat on the dignity of human beings in the manner described, like with a large foot, according to the principle if you don't want to be my slave, then I'll beat your brains out, like you always say. Translator's note: to have seen the light of world is an idiom that simply means to have been born. Billy says, then, in the end, Arafat won't be able to prevail, whereby then, perhaps, the prophesied war in Palestine and Israel will arise, with which the people should wade ankle-deep in human blood. Quetzal says, that is correct. This possibility will be given. Therefore, it will also just depend on the common sense of the nations and world leaders to prevent the insanity of the war. But if nothing is done and if nothing is said against the Israelis and against the Palestinian extremist radical forces and Arab fanatics and against their murderous, degenerate, and hate-filled craft, then the danger of the fulfillment of the prophecies will be very great. Billy says, unfortunately, the Earth people don't let themselves be taught by reason and logic. Reason and logic make no difference to them, as also real love and brotherly love, as responsibility, peace, freedom, harmony, and balance. Even in families, all these high values are disowned, and everything that should be treated with dignity and respect is despised and abused. Parents beat their children, as also husbands beat up their wives or wives maltreat their husbands.